Adam Schiff is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, and Chairman Schiff yesterday appearing, talking about some of the issues concerning anything to do with impeachment, specifically talking about the latest on what we've been hearing from President Trump about supposed phone calls that he made with the president of the Ukraine, and the president had admitted yesterday that yes, he actually did talk a little bit about the former Vice President Joe Biden. On State of the Union yesterday, Chairman Schiff said that if there's any wrongdoing, there must be a return to truth.
There is no privilege that covers corruption. There is no privilege to engage in underhanded discussions. And again, I don't know if this is the subject of whistleblower complaint, but if it is, it needs to be exposed.
Let's talk about corruption in the broadest sense with Dr. William Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, the co-author of News Verdicts, the Debates and Presidential Campaigns, tweeting at Dr. B. Rosenberg. Bill, welcome back. Thanks for being here today.
Good morning.
So the United States is not the only place where the discussion of corruption is part, and obviously there are places where you can directly point to corruption being a big issue, but it has happened. The head of South Korea, the president of South Korea, had to resign. We've seen accusations of corruption in the Israeli elections of late. It's not something that we think of as rampant in the United States, but it is part of a broader global discussion. Put it in perspective for us.
Well, if you go back to 2016, there have been over 10 or 11 world leaders who have had to leave office because of corruption. While you gave a short list, the list is actually much longer in terms of corruption. Includes countries like Italy, Romania, the Czech Republic, Iceland, Ukraine, Lithuania, Russia, Venezuela. The list just goes on and on. And, there are a lot of international efforts to try and reduce corruption. One of the most important organizations in this area is an organization called Transparency International, which is trying to make things more transparent and let people know what's going on around the world. The United States, we might think of as being sort of corruption-free, at least in terms of the way we were perceived pre-Trump. But actually, that's not been the case. We're a score of about 70 out of 100. Countries like North Korea are down around 4, and the top country in the world is a country like Denmark, which is much higher but still not approaching the 100% score. So what we find is that countries are often engaged in behaviors that they probably shouldn't be engaged in. And what we're finding in terms of the current administration, it's almost as if Donald Trump is trying to flaunt his power, knowing that he has a base within the Republican Party that's not going to necessarily go after him. And I think that's where a lot of this arises.
This is the question, I guess, is corruption politically contextual? In other words, I think of a court case, for example, the former governor of Virginia, Governor McDonald, was put on trial and convicted, and then his conviction was overturned because they said that the Justice Department had become overly aggressive, and there was a legal question there to be resolved. But it seems to me that Democrats, Republicans alike seem to line up behind whoever is their accused leader when it comes to maybe certain kinds of corruption, and it's hard to figure out where we as Americans draw the line these days.
Well, the example that you give in Virginia is an excellent one. It appeared that it was a slam dunk that what happened with the governor and his wife was an exhibition of corrupt behavior. They received very expensive gifts and such. They were convicted, and then it came back that on appeal they were sort of exonerated from the charges that the federal government had produced. In a sense, this dealt a major blow to the whole movement to try and stop corruption among political leaders. But on the other hand, Tim, I would suggest that sort of a very rudimentary perspective is if something smells bad, it probably is bad. And while we have to deal with laws, perhaps the laws have to be more definitively laid out, and we have to create situations where our elected officials know that there are consequences for bad behavior. One of those things might be, the decision about whether or not you can prosecute a sitting president. This is one of the big issues that's really sort of not being talked about that much, but, the idea about bringing Trump to trial was something that was looming in the back of the Mueller investigation and didn't really become so evident until the whole process was over, that there was never really going to be a process of taking Donald Trump to court. Mueller really was about trying to expose what had transpired and leaving it to Congress to, if they decided to implement the political resolution of impeachment. So far, the Congress has sort of made the decision that they're not going down that road, particularly with the House of Representatives and Nancy Pelosi counting votes and realizing that if she does go after Donald Trump and is able to get an impeachment charge put into place, it's entirely likely that the Senate, controlled by Mitch McConnell and the Republicans, is going to vote not to remove him from office, and then we're going to have a repeat of the Mueller situation where Donald Trump will claim that he's been exonerated and it was just another witch hunt.
And that is the question, is whether or not it is politically disadvantageous for Democrats to pursue this. They can say we're on the right side of history. We are doing what is our moral charge as members of the House to bring this, and then a vote goes in the Senate. It goes the president's way, and Democrats will have to defend their decision to accuse the president, who is now freed, if you will, by a decision by the Senate. That's the sense that the way things would turn out. So is it that much? Is it that difficult a decision for Democrats?
I think you're summing it up very well. I think the bottom line is that the Democrats, as a party, and probably the nation as a community of citizens, is probably leaning to the fact that that it appears that the president has done things that probably warrant sort of at least a impeachment inquiry or an impeachment trial. But at the same hand, we also know much of what he's been involved with through reporting by various news organizations. Donald Trump will call them fake news organizations, but nonetheless, there's a lot of information out within the public arena. And perhaps the vote on Election Day in 2020 is going to be the ultimate test of whether or not the American public is willing to stand behind Donald Trump or not. And I think what we face is a situation where we have intense polarization, probably more polarized than I can ever remember in terms of recent American history, and with Republicans solidly behind Donald Trump, Democrats solidly against him. And then you have this group of independents, and we have to see how they're going to go. But at the end of the day, the voters will get that chance whether or not Congress exercises its role as the arbiter of impeachment.
Well put. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Take care.
Dr. William Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, co-author of News Verdicts, The Debates in Presidential Campaigns. He is tweeting at Dr. B, that is D-R-B, Rosenberg, R-O-S-E-N-B-E-R-G.